alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to A Live After Reading. I'm your host, Tim Niederreiter, and with me today is a returning guest to the podcast, V.S. Holmes. Welcome back.
Thanks so much for having me. This is always fun.
Yeah, it's a good time, and I have fond memories, kind of the first time we chatted. I say fond memories, but I mean, it kind of all runs together after a while. I remember enjoying this show a lot, and I remember your episode being good, but that's about it.
Well, it's tough. It's tough when like you know people online because it's like you're constantly interacting and seeing each other's stuff. So it's like, when did I actually last talk to you?
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. I think people are going to encounter that a lot with me lately because I'll just get my early plug out of the way that I have this show that comes out every weekday now. So if people listen to that, it's free on Patreon, on my Patreon feed. But if people are listening to that, they'll be like, well, why is this guy even coming out with a show on Sunday? Oh, because this is the one where somebody else is on the podcast, and it's not just him rambling at a wall. Anyway.
I mean, I can do my best wall impression if it makes you feel better.
No need to do that. But tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, actually, and your books, mostly.
Sure. So, hi, I'm V. I'm a international best-selling science fiction and fantasy author. My first series is the Blood of Titans series, and that's epic fantasy, brooding, political, kind of that sort of vibe. And it follows a couple of mostly human characters who are caught in the crossfire of a war between the gods and the titanic creatures that created them. And right now I'm actually currently working on the fifth book in my fast-paced archaeological sci-fi series. And that follows snarky, foul-mouthed Dr. Nell Bentley and her pristine, amazing archaeological site suddenly becomes the center of an intergalactic feud. And she's thrown into this world of high-tech, higher stakes, and really doesn't know what to do with it, except that girl sure is pretty, and so she's going to follow her to the ends of the earth and beyond.
Nice. And I think many people can relate to that, yes.
Yeah, there's a reason why I wrote it.
Absolutely. Though actually, I mean, obviously your focus right now is the science fiction, but I forgot the pitch for your fantasy series. That sounds like it's right up my alley. I should check that out. Anyway.
Oh yeah, totally.
Giant godlike entities and brooding politics. That's it.
Yes.
That's what I like, man. I mean, come on.
I love angst. I love angst and I love snark. So those definitely make appearances in both of my series.
I'm very bad at writing angst. I'm pretty good at snark, I think. This is just my opinion of my own work. I think that when my characters angst, they tend to just be kind of, probably it's just my autistic side shows. I mean, I am autistic, but like, they'll be like, they'll just be like, I'm not talking to you. And then people think they're just being like, just that, but that's just whatever. They're just detached. When in reality, it's like, no, they're not talking because they're pissed off. Is often how it is, or they're upset about something or whatever. But sometimes you gotta go deeper. I mean, with characterization.
Yeah, for sure. I like to joke that a lot of my characters get to say the things that like I can't say, or when I am stuck in that place in my head, it's like, oh, that's what I should have said, or that's what I wish I had the guts to say.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going on. It's like that. To risk the literary reference here, the James Joyce characters in The Dead where they're like, the guy is always like, I could say this, and he never does say anything because it's a James Joyce story. But yeah.
Where's the payoff? Come on.
Exactly. The whole payoff, though, that, I gotta say, The Dead has one of the best ending, just prose-wise, endings of any short story I've ever read. It's pretty amazing. But it is, but yeah, that's the actual payoff, not the character.
Right.
The character's like a dead fish the whole time. He's doomed. The whole thing is he's sad, yeah. Anyway. So, so Eddie, I did not know we were both on the spectrum. That's interesting. I mean,
that's a newer discovery for me.
Okay.
Which was suddenly like, oh, that's okay. All these pieces are falling into place, which has been, frustrating and liberating at the same time. Cause
I understand. I mean, obviously,
why did no one say anything?
Surely somebody could have given me a hand with this.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I was diagnosed as a teenager, so or like 12 years old, maybe even. So I mean, I think it's easier. People find. I mean, it was back in the 90s, so I don't, or no, early 2000s. So I don't really think. I don't think it's common for people at the time. There weren't nearly as many people being diagnosed. I feel like,
for sure, and
it's just gradually swelled up. Yeah, exactly. I was going to say that. I'm just. Yeah. That's what I was trying to get at without using the term boy. I don't know. It just felt weird. No.
Well, yeah.
Anyway,
people who people think are young boys.
I was gonna say male presenting children. Yes, are the people who are most commonly. And I'm like, do I really want to say that? Do I want to put it that way? I mean, it seems reasonable. That seems correct. But yeah. Anyway,
I don't think there's a non-awkward way to say it.
There isn't, is there?
No.
But luckily, awkward is my specialty. So here we said in the most awkward way possible between the two of us. I think, definitely rack that one up on the scoreboard.
There we go.
That's a 10 out of 10. At least from this judge. But it is. I don't want to focus too much on the neuroatypical stuff because that's part and parcel of being a writer for a lot of people too. I mean,
yes.
But it is challenging. I mean, did you have any real revelations about how you wrote characters or anything because of that? I know I did. Because because with me, I was so detached from my characters. It took so long, just like in real life, it takes me forever to get to know people. So I have to really write a bunch about a character before I get to know them. It's that kind of thing for me.
That's really interesting that you say that you have to write them to get to know them. Because for a long time, like my first few books, I didn't really know anything about like pantsing versus plotting, or discovery writing, or whatever terms people are using now. I just word vomited those books. And, I was going through college and stuff like that anyways. So it was just like in my free time, I wasn't really thinking except like I must get the story out. But a lot of people who, at least as far as I know, are more neurotypical were having a hard time connecting with my characters. And, I couldn't really figure out why. Because they made total sense to me.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I had a similar experience. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, so I think that was part of it. And then when I switched to plotting, I kind of stripped all of my connection to my characters away in exchange for attempting to connect them to quote normal people. And now I think I've hit a happy medium with that, but I hadn't really thought of that being maybe something to having to do with being neuroatypical. I definitely noticed that in trying to relate to my characters or connect with them in some way, I did have a lot of trouble trying to connect with my very female characters. Which now in hindsight it's like, oh, because you're not actually a girl. You just sometimes like dressing like one, but it's all a performance. And so I think, and for me, the way my brain works and the way I relate to gender, because everything about being human is sort of a performance.
Yes.
Those are very intertwined. So I don't know if I could really untangle what comes from where, but that's definitely a good point. I haven't really thought of that until you said it.
Well, I mean, that's kind of my luxury as being a cis male. I don't have to worry about a lot of other stuff that other people have to deal with. And I have to worry about my hair falling out, but that's, whatever. And I don't worry about it anymore. It's happened. But, is worrying, that just makes it happen faster. So anyway, that's a good point though, that there's a lot of other pieces of identity and who people are that who you are specifically,
right,
that obviously feed into your characters than just being an undiagnosed ASD person. And I for a while there anyway, obviously not anymore.
So sorry, our neighbor's driving by with a very loud bike.
Oh, I can't hear him.
Great. Awesome.
Your microphone is doing a good job. No.
Good, because it's deafening.
Well, I even have the window open next to me, which is probably not a wise decision, but I bet you couldn't even tell. See, it's one of those things, like the window is, there's even a hole in the screen. I need to get that fixed anyway. Bugs will be getting here any day now.
They're already there.
I'm sure they are. Yeah. Anyway, so other than the lack of just general the lack of continuity to the wall of my studio, so to speak. There are many more interesting things to talk about. Anyway, so when you write, but it does interest me a lot that when you'll approach like the tech, from a technical side, because like I write a lot of female characters and I have a hard time with them as well. But obviously, I didn't grow up with anyone thinking I was a girl.
Right.
I had a mustache and a beard when I was 15, so whatever. It looked pretty much the same except for the gradual thinning on top for most of my life at this point. And I guess I hadn't thought about it. It's like, yeah, I thought like, okay, so I was indoctrinated into being a boy, and I wasn't very good at that really, because I wasn't very good at most people skills when I was a kid, right? So I was a very antisocial kid. And I wonder if that probably has more to do with my view of characterization than even just straight up being autistic. So I'm really just mulling that over out loud. Sorry about that.
No, that's great. That's how like the best thoughts happen, right? It's just gotta talk them out.
Yes. And actually, do you have you say you found a happy medium between discovering and plotting? And I'm curious, what does that look like in the process side of things?
Honestly, so the book that most recently came out, Heretics, book 4, that book I truly neurotically plotted. I had a former writing partner. We were trying this very in-depth style of writing, and it was just basically planning everything out down to the very paragraphs, okay, the beats of the paragraphs, and it was awful. Just not. I mean, if it works for some people, that's fantastic. But I did it, and I did the whole book that way, and then by the end of the book, I'm like, I hate this, and none of it makes sense.
Yeah,
and I realized that there was no soul to it. There was nothing there. It was just the beats, but I really didn't care about them, and so I completely had to rewrite the book. This was also mid-pandemic, so the heavy plotting and arguably my draw to the heavy plotting was probably I am in control of nothing right now because the world is a disaster. So that was the first half of 2020, and then I did an overhaul, basically rewrote the book for the latter half. So I guess that answers my question. It did come out in 2021.
Oh, well, we found it.
Yes. But through that process, I realized that maybe I'm not that much of a plotter. But I do like order, and I enjoy I'm sure you understand this. I enjoy being able to see everything laid out to a certain point. But I didn't want to lose the soul, and so now what I've sort of found a happy medium with is doing a chaos draft, just doing the word vomit for the first draft, and then I will think about all the beats that I really enjoy, that I really think the story needs to hit. Especially writing a series, there are certain things you have to pay attention to, and so then I'll go through and I'll do my outline before I revise. And then
that's
before
smart.
I do my final,
I think that makes so much sense.
I do another one.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's really
helpful.
Yeah. I should do something. I should make an intermediate step where I do an outline or something in between. Because right now I always try to start with the premise because I'm a serious discoverer as well. So I'm not sure how much you remember from our previous chat, if I mentioned that last time or not. I don't know. I think so. It's been a while. But especially when I dictate, I try to come up with a premise. I come up with maybe a premise, but then it's so hard. I mean, it's so tough because I'm going so fast. It's I'm running off the rails all the time when I'm dictating, and that's fine, but I need to be aware of what I'm doing, and since I can't even see the words appear, it becomes difficult to know how far I've even gone. But that's the part that makes me. That's the part that actually I like the most, though, about the dictation draft is I can't watch. I'm not looking at a computer. I'm looking at whatever I surround me. I'm walking around. I'm talking to a voice recorder. So it's really it's not only is it better for my health, I gained like 20 pounds when I took a break from dictation. I gained all the weight I lost from doing it
you're
back.
pacing when you're talking.
Yeah, I'm
when
pacing
you have
around.
To
I'm not.
phone call.
Well, whenever I have any phone call or whenever
Right, yes.
I have to stand up for a long period of time, yes. But yeah, I just paced around. I would just pace around. My writing sessions were still about an hour long, so I'd do 6,000 words and be drenched in sweat at the end of that hour or whatever. A lot of the time, at least the arm that's holding the voice recorder. Yeah, about 6,000 steps. Yes, the arm that's holding the voice recorder would be like, the worst. It's vile.
Yeah.
But that's why I experimented with lavalier mics and stuff, but those are just not as ubiquitous as holding the actual microphone in my mouth.
Yeah.
But anyway, the funny thing about that is, though, that I went back to typing for a lot of 2021, and then I'm like, I was so unproductive. It was a brutal year for me. And it's one of those things that when I introduced dictation to the process in 2019, I didn't realize. I was like, okay, this is it. This is so much faster. And then I became a pretty solid editor of my own work by the end of 2020. It took a while.
Yeah.
This is almost a year and a half before I was like, I think I've got this stuff down as far as editing it. And then in December 2020, I'm like, I think I should type again. And I should just tried it because it is fun. And I'm not trying to. And honestly, I think typing is like I typed today. I still like typing.
Yeah.
But it's so much slower, and I feel so inhibited when I can see the words appear. That's the funny part.
That's so fascinating to me because I can't think of a sentence without being able to see it. But I'm also I'm not auditory at all. And the way I read is in like chunks. Like I'll read basically the whole sentence or the whole paragraph at once, and then my brain sorts the words, which means I'm not very good at like proofreading because I don't really see the mistakes. Which is a nice way of thinking that there aren't any.
But you got to employ some helpers there, probably.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think it's just like I can't like my brain just goes and stops when I can't see the the sentences around what I'm writing. I sort of forget where I am in the story.
Yeah.
That's what scares me about dictation.
Oh, I mean, I was very terrified about that originally, and and when I first started out, I remember I tried dictating with notes in front of me. I tried dictating into the computer. I tried a bunch of different ways, and it just isn't effective, because if I type and I can see what the words appear, it's no faster than typing if I can dictate and I'm watching them appear on screen, because that's an option.
Yeah.
But if I do that, it's like, well, now the words are appearing on screen, and I'm just caught up in trying, like, oh, that sucks, that's not good. And all the self-editing comes right out, and I'm such a bad self-editor when I'm looking at what I'm typing, especially because after editing like 3 or 4 dictated novels, which are beastly, they're the worst editing, the most difficult thing to edit. Well, not the most difficult, they're the most workload for the editing. It's pretty easy because there's so much, everything's wrong basically when it comes out from dictation, at least for me. And the funny thing about that is that it's liberating, because then this all feels like garbage anyway, and I can just cut through it and make it whatever I want. And so it is a lot like your vomit draft. That's why I thought. Yeah,
I was gonna say that definitely. I think that's part of it. Is like it can be trash. It's meant to be trash.
Yes.
And as my day job's as an archaeologist, so it's like I dig through trash for a living. So here we are again. Let's try and find like the one useful piece in this mess.
Yeah, it's also, was it the sculptor, Michelangelo, right? Like, he takes away all the parts that aren't the statue, or whatever. I think that was Michelangelo.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a nice way of thinking about it, as opposed to a trash fire.
But sometimes it doesn't work. Like, if you don't have a clear idea of what the story is, like you said, you rewrote a novel in 2020. Well, I also did that. I also spent most of 2020 rewriting a novel that I dictated 80,000 words for in 2019. At the end of 2019, I'm like, I have an 80,000 word novel, and I'm like, this is garbage, and like, not just in this is bad dictation, but in a this isn't the story I wanted to tell kind of way.
Right.
And so I had to do that one all over again, which it's not so bad for me, at least not in theory, but it was only my second attempt at dictating a novel, so I thought, is this going to be way worse? And I had to come up with new characters and stuff, even though I used basically the same situation. So it was a very weird transition there, but it did become a pretty good book, at least in my opinion. I do like that one a lot. And I guess that kind of hit. This is going to sound like a random change of subject, but it does have to do because that book had this element in it. Had an element where there's a couple scenes in that book, but specifically there's this one scene where the two characters are talking about this tea that is like a prophylactic or whatever or something. Or I don't know if that's the right word. No, it's like the morning after thing, morning after pill.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of prophylactic. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's basically it's the fantasy equivalent of that because it's a fantasy book, and it's actually pretty important to the story because it's like because of the story world because there's this whole element that I haven't really revealed in that world yet. Well, I need to I'll save that for later. But it's kind of a foreshadowing thing about how. Yeah, you're not supposed to do that, but people do it all the time. You know, you shouldn't be preventing their, the will of the being that is in charge of everybody, basically the God character, basically.
Yeah.
But we don't. But if we didn't do it, we'd always be. We wouldn't be able to fool around. So let's just do it. Yeah, it's that kind of thing. But that scene, I'd had that scene in my head when I wrote the first book. When I wrote the book the first time, and yet it never didn't end up. It didn't end up in there, and that's kind of one of the major key points where I realized it was like that. This isn't going to work, but it is in the finished book.
Yeah.
Because I went back and I'm like, no, the book has to be shaped around scenes like this, not scenes that are like Marvel movies.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you say that. So I had the book that I'm currently writing, which is number 5, Fugitives. I also had to go through and rewrite basically the entire second half of it. And what was so frustrating for me is I had a couple scenes that I was really excited about. And when I was finished with the book, they just didn't fit. Like I'd kind of like shoehorned them in there.
Yeah.
Like there was no real proper segue. And it was like just trying to cram too much in. And like... Thankfully, I had a mental breakdown and wasn't able to publish the book. And that gave me the time to realize. Yeah.
It's no fun, but it came in handy for the book's quality, I'm sure.
It did, and I realized that I really was excited about those scenes because they were supposed to be in the book, but the scenes all around them actually belong to the final book in the series. So like half the book I was writing was the wrong book entirely, which I guess is sort of the downside to the chaos draft. I think I was still trying to kind of streamline the whole thing and be like, there's like maybe one step after the chaos draft. It's like, no, there's
more than one.
Like you're not shortening your workload. You're just making it easier for you to do it. So
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I found because obviously my rough draft doesn't take much time when I dictate. It takes like 10 hours to do per se, or 10 or 12, 10 or 20 hours total work time.
Wow.
Depending on how long the book is, right? And actually, the book I'm working on now should only take 6 hours to finish at this point.
That's incredible.
And I've only got 10,000 words.
That's so cool.
But that's just the rough draft. The subsequent drafts take at least 3 times that long put together. But it's hard. That's still not bad. I got pretty into the metrics of I'm not sure. Not everyone does that, but I got pretty into the metrics of measuring like how fast do I type per hour or how fast do I dictate per hour, which is a lot more exciting, frankly, because it's so many words. But I mean, if I can do 2 or 3 chapters in an hour, well, boom, I'm looking at dictating a book. That's 20 chapters in 10 hours. It's pretty reasonable.
That's so neat. I haven't I guess because I still like squeeze in my writing when I can. So like, I'd be interested to see. Now there's like a gizmo that you could turn on when you're working on certain things, and it'll time like only the hours that you spend on that. But I'd be interested to see like actually how long my books take to write, because I'll be like, it takes 2 years. It's like, well, but you're not like writing it for 2 whole years. You're like living life and working. And,
that's
sleeping.
Like when people say, it's like, it's the old, you sleep for a third of your life, which is true in most cases, and it's weird. Yeah, I mean, frankly, I slept for half my life over the last 2 days. But anyway, it's just actually even scarier. I'm like, why did I sleep so long? That's ridiculous.
You're saving something?
Well, no, I'm actually paying off a sleep debt is what I realized. Like, I skipped a night of sleep a few days earlier in the week, and I'm like, no wonder I'm still paying that back. I already thought 1 would be enough, but I guess they needed interest.
Yeah.
The sleep demons.
Like everything else.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, I guess what I'm trying to get at here is I think it's I think the chaos draft, the fast moving, but regardless of that stuff, the metrics for how fast I keeping track of all that stuff was kind of helpful for me. But on the other hand, it also makes me feel like, it doesn't actually take that long. But there's so much more time is spent. That's the other thing. So much time is spent when you're not writing, thinking about the book and getting ready. Even for me, I don't really think about the book at all consciously when I'm not working on it, or when I'm not looking at Scrivener, which I still put all the files in Scrivener to organize everything. Is pretty handy, and I have a bunch of notes and stuff in there. And I have this big premise I built up at first, but I still think I should be able to knock out a book, in 30 or 40 hours. Total with editing, and it is, but hours doesn't help. It's really days that kind of count when it for a full time writer anyway. It's like I'm spending all my time doing this. If I can't, so for me the days are what matter because I don't have another job.
Yeah.
And yet I get I guess what I'm saying is there's a danger to using metrics that just make you sound good. Like it doesn't take that long to actually write the book. Then why don't I have more books?
Well, and also, you'll have one good... So I do track my words, but I've stopped, setting goals, I guess, for my word count, because, I have a great day where, maybe I was, just really engaged in the scene, or I'm someone who thinks about my book, all the time when I'm not working on it. It's, my favorite thing to think about when I'm driving, and... when I'm can't do anything but just stare at the road.
Yeah.
And so I'll, maybe have thought of this scene and I'll know all the beats that I want to hit and the great one-liner that I want to use or whatever. And, or the explosion that's going to happen. And I'll just bang out 1,000 words or 2,000 words in just one sitting, which for me is a lot.
That's a good chunk though. It's a reasonable amount.
Yeah. And then
for anybody, 1,000 words can be, you can do a lot though with 1,000 words. That's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, that's true. And then I'll have a scene the next day where it is pulling teeth to get 300, and it's hard for me to put aside the perfectionist, the overachiever stuff. That came from being neurodivergent in school.
Yeah.
So I think for me it's now I'll note the words mostly just because I'll have a goal for the books in the series tend to be this length or whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't really track it anymore. That went away with the planning and the plotting and the actual planner. And
that can be liberating. That can be really liberating. Awesome. I'm glad to hear it because I used to come up with the premise of my books in spreadsheets. That's how I would do it, or I'd plot chapters in spreadsheets and stuff. Back before I had Scrivener, I would just okay, every file was a separate Word document or a separate TXT file. Every chapter is one of those. But then I'd have them all organized and arranged basically by a spreadsheet. And that is, I'm never doing that again.
I
so much
I
easier
still love
now.
my spreadsheets. But
I do love spreadsheets, but not for that. Yeah.
Point of view in my fantasy books because they have several
so many
point of view characters, and I have to do that because it's okay, this is who needs to, do what when. But I haven't written a fantasy book in a hot minute. So.
Fair enough. I try to avoid having a ton of point of views in my fantasy books, but they do get bigger. Yeah. Was it my in one Demon Hunter? That's my main fantasy series. With the bigger books. Those books have been getting. The books get shorter, but there are more points of view in them, which is kind of funny. The first three, each book is shorter than the previous one, but just a little bit. But then they each have more point of view characters. It's just I don't know what's going on here. Maybe that's why I took a break from writing those for a while. I'm I don't know what I'm doing here. and I do it.
That's true for me too.
I definitely want to get back to them though, because I got to the point where I thought this is where the story actually starts after book 3, which is very funny. But you were saying something. Sorry, I cut you off there.
I don't remember what I was saying.
Okay, never mind.
Probably wasn't important.
Okay then. Sorry about that. I always feel guilty for being a little rude. It is my show, but I still shouldn't be rude to the guest, especially not then. Whatever. So
that's conversation. That's just going back and forth. You're fine.
That's true. Whatever. Anyway, so the one last question because we are running a little low on time. What kind of and here I got to discover the question. What kind of stuff? Because let me frame this first because it is kind of a long question. I've been noticing a lot that there are scenes that I really want to put in the book, and there's scenes that are kind of what readers love to read, right? There's particular kinds of elements that people want to have see in their books of particular genres, and then there's the weird stuff I want to put in, and I'm trying to kind of make those meet, And do you ever think about things in those terms, or did you ever?
Definitely. I definitely used to. So that I think that was part of what was happening when I was doing the heavy duty plotting, was trying to figure out those beats and the obligatory scenes that people expect in science fiction. And I read a lot as a kid. I watched a lot of sci-fi movies as a younger adult. I wasn't really allowed TV until I was like 15, but I absorbed a lot of stories, a lot of fiction stories. And I think what was hard for me was I really internalized what the beats were for those genres. And they're obviously the genres that I like to write too. And so I was thinking too hard about what could qualify as those scenes. And I was thinking sort of too literal, I guess, about what those scenes could be, and less about how those scenes would play out through this specific character or in this specific world. And I found that, once I'm through like the chaos draft and the revision, and I really have the bones and the meat of the story, that most of the time those beats have kind of fallen into place. They might not be exactly where they're supposed to be, or I might need to pay off some things that I seeded in the beginning. But for me, like, my instinct, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. My instinct for those scenes is pretty good, which sounds very conceited.
No, that doesn't at all. It's just, people have different skills and different basic aptitudes when it comes to the craft. And just knowing what those are isn't conceited. It's kind of important to be able to evaluate how you're able to do stuff. Or otherwise you're like, no, I suck at everything. And if you just try to be humble, you're not going to have a reasonable assessment of your own abilities. So don't worry about it.
But no, I definitely internalized a lot of those. And so I find that my instinct usually leads me in at least the right direction. And I just let myself include the weird shit because I don't think I can, like, it's going to show up in the book somewhere, even if I try to keep it out. And I think the people who like my imperfect characters and my weird worlds and my love for gross things and darkness and death and romance and how all those intertwine, they're going to like those scenes too. And those are really the people that I'm writing for anyways. And so I've been trying to, I sort of hate the term like lean in. I feel like it's overused.
Fair enough. But I get the idea of what you're trying to say there, though.
Yeah. I've been just sort of falling into it, I guess, and letting myself do that. And I think my books are better for it.
I've had a similar experience. I mean, I don't think I've been as successful with actually finding an audience as you have so far, but I have definitely. But I think it's partially because I've leaned back, and I think retreating from the thing that you're interested in, if that thing is embarrassing or crazy or weird, which is often is for me. Like, I'm the people, but when I put out when I release the book that is weird, people respond to it. And I get those are my most successful ones. The ones where I'm like, I'm just going to do this thing because I really want to do it. And to hell with the fact that it's embarrassing to me to think that someone's going to actually read it.
I think a lot of authors, part of what helped me do that was a lot of my favorite authors, I saw them pitching their work, whether just like to readers or to actual, like agents and editors and publishers. I saw them pitching the weird shit. And I was like, oh, well, if they can write that, then I can obviously write this, which is like only half as weird. And I think that helped me, because I saw that a lot of people got weird.
Absolutely. No, and sometimes like my friend Reinhardt, who's written for Wizards of the Coast now, he's written some stories for them. He's a big fan of their mythology, and that's for the setting he was writing in. But then he wants to go to this other level, right? Like that's the kind of thing that, like, he wants to, like, oh no, I want to go back to the old stuff, and that's the thing that's like controversial, apparently, with some fans or whatever. But then it's that level of but whenever I talk to him about it, I'm like, no, I'm sure people are going to appreciate that. You're going back to the well, the old well that everyone forgot was even in the woods. It's overgrown, but once you get it out of there, that water's going to be hopefully pure and not brackish. Who knows? Right. I was going to say, this analogy stopped working when it became an old disused well.
Polluted.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I think when it comes, because like a lot of the weird shit is controversial. And I think it's not so much the topics or the dynamics, because a lot of it I think has to do with dynamics between characters. But it's what you do with that and what your characters do with that and how you are presenting it. Where, you know, a lot of the older stuff, it's like they were dealing with it, but not maybe in the way that they could have, or with as much nuance, or maybe not the right people writing those stories or telling those stories. But there are so many great parts of that weird shit that I think we need to talk about more and come into contact more, because maybe that's where a lot of our society's fear is coming from, and that's why we're so like in this weird Puritan
I know.
thing that's happening.
We don't have to get into all that. That's
Yes.
This show's supposed to be fun, but but frankly, I do pay way too much attention to the political situation in this country, and it's frankly pretty scary. Worldwide,
that's
it's
what
pretty
fiction
scary.
is, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Focusing on stuff. So
That's true. I just don't know if we can get into that can of worms when we should be wrapping up 5 minutes ago.
putting the lid back on.
But it's okay. It's okay. So, V, tell people where they can find your work and what they should look for, where they should look for you online.
Sure. So you can find me at vsholmes.com. I'm on most social medias, Twitter. Most of the time I'm on Twitter. Facebook occasionally. And Instagram, if you don't mind the occasional picture of me in my work attire and some dogs and bugs and dead things that I like to post. And if you are curious about my work and want to see if it is up your alley or your particular brand of weird, you can go to my website, and I have a short story set in the Nell Bentley universe and also in my fantasy universe, and you can have those for free, just signing up for my newsletter list, so you can see if I'm your brand of weird.
Wonderful. I may have to do that myself, because honestly, I lose track, but I've been reading a lot more lately, and I think now it's time. It's time for me to catch up with some of these people, some of these stories that I've missed. You know,
there's so many good stories.
Exactly. It's true, but there's some of them I can track down, and now that I have a lead, maybe I'll follow that trail. All right. So thanks once again for being on the show, V. It's been awesome, and thanks again to the listeners for listening. I know there's a few of you out there that are pretty dedicated, but I mean, always good to hear from you. You can write me at tim@timniederreiter.com, and that was completely impromptu. I wasn't supposed to pimp that right now, but hey, write your feedback to me if you want to, or write a comment on the post on my website, which is mentalcellarpublications.com. And you can find all my books at timniederreiter.com/books. That's got all the covers and everything there. You can find one that looks weird. Click on it. You'll like it, I hope. All right, thanks for listening, everybody. Have a good week, and I will talk to you again soon from the past, most likely, because I'm on vacation. All right, take it easy, people. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
That tears it.